Hi there. In this video, I want to look at how you can correctly and clearly describe a percentage. Because if you're going to be using data to make an argument, if you're going to be writing with data, talking about figures, it's important to be able to describe the data that you're looking at clearly, concisely, and accurately. And it's something I often see people struggle with. So that is our topic for this slide. In the next video, we will start looking at how you compare two different percentages, which is a somewhat more complex issue. So I said very simply, but important, how you describe a percentage. So let's just start with this pie chart. You can look at it, and it's talking about health insurance and Asian people in the United States. And there are two different statements here, A and B. And I want you to read both of them and decide which of these statements corresponds to the pie chart, or do you think that they both correspond to the pie chart, that neither of them do? Are you confused? Give me your thoughts on the form. Okay. I'm going to ask you another question now before I go back and answer this one. Take a look at this statistic, which is that 48% of Americans who primarily get their news from social media are ages 18 to 29. So I've given you two different pie charts. And much like the last question, I want you to tell me which of these two pie charts corresponds to this statistic, or again, do they both? Does neither of them? Or are you confused? And again, please give me your answer on the form. Now let's take a closer look at this. When I look at these two statements, A and B, I want to emphasize the difference. The first one is saying in 2018, it's talking about 6.8% of Asians in the US, whereas the second one will be talking about 6.8% of people in the US without health insurance. And whatever goes after the of, that is describing the whole of the percentage, the entire pie. The percentage is taking that group of people and describing one specific slice of it. So when you look at this pie, is this pie looking at the universe of all Asian people in the United States? Or is it looking at the universe of all people in the United States without health insurance? That is an essential question to answer if you're trying to explain a percentage accurately. The rest of the sentence, the did not have health insurance part in statement A, or the are Asian part in statement B, that's what describes the wedge. In sentence A, we're talking about a group of Asians who do not have health insurance. So the part after the of describes the whole, the next part describes the wedge, the part, the slice. So now again, I want you to look at this and try to decide which one is the whole and which one is the part. And if you look at this screen, you'll see some of the cues that I use to try to decide. First of all is the title, Asian people in the United States. That should be describing the whole chart. If you make a pie chart, it's really important to give a label to the whole. The other thing to do is to think about what are the unlabeled wedges. If this is a wedge for people who have no health insurance, what's the rest of the chart? And in statement A, the rest would be people who do have health insurance. We'd be taking all Asian people and splitting them up into having health insurance or not. Whereas for statement B, we'd be looking at the world of all people without health insurance and splitting them up into whether they are Asian or not. So you have to ask yourself, which one is the whole, which one is the part, and what would the other parts be? In this case, as I expect we'll all come to agree, the whole is Asian people. Looking at all Asian people in the United States, looking at how many of them did versus did not have health insurance in 2018. We can make similar pies for white people, Black people, Hispanic people, and break them up into these same two parts. Now let's look at the social media one. 48% of, remember the stuff after the of gives me the whole. So my whole is Americans who primarily get their news from social media. And the rest of it is the part, the ages 18 to 29. So let's look at these two pies. Pie A, the whole, is people whose main news source is social media, and the part is the age 18 to 29. Whereas for pie B, the whole would be the primary news source for 18 to 29-year-olds. And one part would be people whose primary news source was social media, whereas other parts would be other news sources like cable news or news channel websites. So those are my two choices. Which one is being described by this statistic? Are we taking people who get their main news from social media and looking at how old they are? Or are we looking at 18 to 29-year-olds and asking where they get their news? And in this case, the whole is Americans who get their news from social media, and the part is the age. This statistic is almost backwards from the way people expect it to be. It's much easier to talk about where the 18 to 29-year-olds get their news, but that's not what this statistic is telling you. And that's one reason why it's important to be able to correctly describe percentages, because this percentage doesn't mean what you might think it does. Let's just try a couple more examples. Here's a correct statement. According to a Pew Research Center poll, in mid-July 2020, 20% of college graduates in the United States said that it was probably true that the coronavirus outbreak was intentionally planned by powerful people. So I'd like you to take a moment on the form and tell me which is the whole and what is the part, and what would the other parts of this percentage be? Okay. The whole, the part after the of, is college graduates in the United States. We're looking at all college graduates in the United States and whether they felt that the coronavirus was intentionally planned by powerful people. 20% of them, 20% of college graduates thought that it probably was. The other wedges, incidentally, were those who thought it was definitely true, those who thought it was probably not true, and those who thought it was definitely not true. These numbers do not add up to 100%, which suggests that some people refuse to answer the question. So the whole is the level of education. The percentage, the part, is how likely it is that they thought the coronavirus was intentionally caused by powerful people. Let's just try one more. The Black homeownership rate in the United States in 2019 was 40.6%. So this one's a little bit tricky because it doesn't have an of. So I'm asking you to think, what do you think is going on here? What's the part? What's the whole? What are the other parts that make up the whole? And again, describe that on the form. Here's my answer, the Black home ownership rate. That is telling us what percent of Black households owned their own home. So when we rephrase it like that, we can see that the whole is Black households in the United States, and the part is those who owned their own home versus didn't, for example, rented or were living with extended family. This is only looking at the universe of Black homeowners. It is not telling us what percentage of homeowners are Black. That would be a completely different statistic. We cannot tell the answer to that from this figure. Okay. Thank you. That's the end of this slide, this video, excuse me. I will have another video for you looking at how you compare different percentages, because that's really where the interesting stuff often comes in.